Now, let me introduce Paul. Paul is a co-founder and managing partner of Two Flow Ventures, and he is the CEO of Aiken Biosciences. Over the decade, Paul has been served as the CEO or CFO for a number of companies, and I won't read them all. He is a member of the Chicago Biomedical Consortium and the Venture Capital Committee, and he's a trustee at Ravinia. Paul, I need some tickets this summer.
I heard that, bro.
And the last thing that I'll say is Paul is a former U.S. regular Army commissioned officer in the infantry, and I want to thank you for your service. Paul, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Keith. I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Thank you for asking me to be on your show.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, I get excited because when I have talked to you over the time, and I really get into kind of what you guys are doing, you've combined a startup hub and venture capital. I think that's pretty remarkable and unique. So how did you get your start? How did you, well, first question is, who is Paul? Let folks know, who is Paul Burton?
Well, you did a decent job of discussing it, but I'm a kid from the west side of Chicago. Um, um, my parents are migrated, their families. I'm not going to go into it too heavily, but both of them migrated from the South. My dad from Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and my mom from Illinois or Greenwood, Mississippi. Both their parents left right around the time of the Emmett Till situation occurred and the mass migration of African Americans during that time. They moved to the west side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of four children. I'm a product of the Chicago public school system, and you know I actually earned co-authorships by the time I completed three co-authorships in peer-reviewed journals, life science research, pharmacology. By the time I finished up undergrad, so I've been looking at this world of life science and healthcare innovation for almost 38 years now, 39 years, a long time.
Wow. I apologize because ladies and gentlemen, I have a little bit of a cough and I am doing my best to kind of control it. So if I sound like I'm a little shaky in my voice, I am. And so with that, Paul,
the good thing is, Mr. Keefe, is that I can't catch COVID over this video conference.
That's right, and nor can anyone else.
Yeah, so I don't need to have any apprehension, do I?
No, I'm good. So being a Chicago bred, what high school did you go to? I went to Carver.
I graduated. Where'd you go?
I went to Carver.
Okay, that's an outstanding school. I've heard a lot about it. I went to initially Weber, Archbishop Weber, all boys Catholic, and then for 2 years, and then ultimately graduated from Taft High School near O'Hare Airport.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's a little different. A lot of my path, I think, is a little different, but that was the path that I needed to go down.
Well, authoring in undergrad, 3 peer-reviewed articles is pretty substantial. So I don't know if that meant you were a nerd or you were in the right place or you just always thinking outside the box. I'm not sure which one it is, but it was pretty doggone good.
A lot of it was I was in the right place.
Okay.
By that time, I had become a nerd. I didn't start out as a nerd. When I was, in grammar school, I was the kid that wanted to, be a professional football player like a lot of folks. But by the time I had finished up my junior year of high school, I realized I wasn't going to be a professional football player. And,
okay.
And
Did you play?
Yeah, I played quite a bit. I'm wide receiver, defensive back, kickoff returner, punt returner, and I was good, but I wasn't that good. And these brothers are very competitive out here, and I was smart enough to realize I wasn't going to become a pro. And the big issue, frankly speaking, was that by the time I was a junior and finishing up my junior year of high school, the realities of the economy, I began to realize those realities, right? When earlier, when you were a kid, just go to school to to hang out with your friends. But by the time I finished up my junior year in high school, I was at a public high school because the family could no longer afford the Catholic high school. By that time, I became really focused on economics. And I began to realize how much my parents had both already contributed and sacrificed for both my education and my siblings' education. And it became really shameful in my mind. I was embarrassed over the fact that I hadn't put forth a more substantial effort. And
Hmm.
so by that time, I committed myself to do the very best I could in every class I entered from that point
That's
forward.
that's excellent. So it sounds like you've been insightful from a very early age. To look around and look at your environment. A lot of I always say that good times create weak people, hard times create strong folks, and people get mad at me for that. But when you don't have the resources and you have to be innovative, I think it really does do something to folks to make sure that they can get where they want to go if they're motivated. So with that, you know, what came first? What led you into the venture capital world? Um, when I look at your background, is stellar, by the way. How did you navigate from, Taft High School to the university, and then from there on to into the world that you're in now?
Sure, happy to share that. So the that research that I did while I was an undergrad student at the University of Illinois at Chicago was helpful. And it certainly gave a strong impression around my abilities. The I earned a co-authorship. I wasn't the lead researcher, but I did a lot of the work, which is how I earned my co-authorship in that work. Uh, and in addition to all of that, I become a regular on the dean's list from an academic standpoint. Every marking period, we could count on a letter from, I think it was Representative Gutierrez, congratulating me for being on the dean's list. So just hard work and good academic performance semester after semester. That's what it really amounted to. Uh, my work in the Army ROTC program while I was an undergrad student was also, I'm sure, useful. And then serving on active duty was also undoubtedly useful. Uh, in addition to that, I attended law school and business school. I earned both a JD and an MBA degree from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And it was at that time that I learned what it was to be an investment banker. And prior to that time, I didn't know what an investment banker was.
I believe it.
And
Yeah.
so someone educated me on what it was, and then a couple of folks suggested that I ought to be one. And I ultimately came to the view that it was exactly the thing I needed in terms of an education and access to information to do the things that were really important to me. My mantra became relatively early on in my life, probably around the time that I decided I was going to focus on my academics. My mantra became to to be a participant in the transformation of African American communities, similar to the one that I was a product of. And so um, uh, you know all of that, the law, the JD, the MBA, the focus on trying to improve my community and communities similar to the community I grew up in. All of that, I think, contributed to me ultimately becoming an investment banker, which then gave me the insight to being a venture capitalist. They're different for sure, but the investment banking provides one with a view of the world of high finance, and that world of high finance is it's a special world.
You prefer one over the other? Of course, it must be venture capital because that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, I absolutely prefer being a venture capitalist versus being an investment banker. Maybe in large part because uh, I like the fact that as a venture capitalist, I'm making I'm making a principal bet. As a investment banker, I'm more of an agent, and I'm more or less executing on someone else's desires or objectives. But as a venture capitalist, I'm making an investment largely based off of my judgment, my experience, my knowledge, and what my team can bring to bear, and then I'm going to be held accountable based off of the company's actual performance. And so I think it's a bit more meritorious, merit based, frankly, in terms of how well you do or don't do uh, being a venture capitalist versus being an investment banker.
Let's get into that before we do. I you know, like you, I went to a high school. My folks didn't have college degrees, and I knew I wanted to go into science. I loved it, and I went to the University of Wisconsin Madison. Go Badgers! And came out, worked for Upjohn Company, and went back to Booth and got my MBA. And I remember wanting to just have a good job and then wanting to get the big job, VP, blah, blah. I left there and went to a startup. And a startup company, my family thought I was crazy because it didn't really have any products yet. It just was betting on the future. And that company ended
You
up
got a smart family, no college degree or anything. They still knew.
right.
Instinctively, they knew what was right.
Exactly. And I remember, I was making a nice salary, but when that company had a half $1 billion of investor gain, it sold for $730 million, and I'd come in early. That's when I recognized the difference between a high salary and wealth creation. And, and how ideas and business can really level set and take folks to another level of wealth creation, and so it started me on a path of understanding business from a different perspective. And so, when I started looking at what you guys are doing, you just said something pretty remarkable. You have to make bets, and you got to make some pretty bets, and those bets can, they could tank, but they can also do really, really well. So
That's right.
so what's your process for picking uh your bets?
Yes, well, excellent question, and you're 100% right. That's the reason why I'm in this business. I like that. I like being held accountable for real,
Mhm.
and this business does that. So my process, one of the so there. So I want to try to do this in a somewhat concise manner and kind of get to the crux of it. And I think part of what you're asking is what are the criteria for our investment decisions? And
Well, I didn't want you to put your secret sauce out there, but
I'm going to put out some of it, right? And I'm okay with. So one of the criteria is that we like to bet on geniuses, but we do. We like to bet on people
smart
who
is
have
important.
been, yes, who are renowned in their particular field with their expertise, have been doing it for more than a minute, 15, 20 years ideally, if not longer, and are regarded, as uh, foremost leaders in their spaces. And we've done that on a number of occasions, and it provides you with a lot of options, and that you don't pay for, frankly speaking, is arbitrage opportunity in that regard. We like to invest in assets early on, straight up venture. We'd love to do it when we can acquire the asset primarily from a university, an academic institution, but we're okay with doing the same at a at an industry, at a biotech or pharmaceutical company, if they have an asset that we think is worthy of moving forward. We like it when we can bring in our own team
Ooh.
to advance that asset. We love it when we can go to our network or go to the world, really the universe, and find the best people in the world to manage that particular kind of asset or that particular type of venture, that particular type of opportunity, where we can go to the world and find the best person to do it. In terms of the actual day-to-day management of the business. Generally speaking, the scientific piece is going to come from a scientific founder, the person who came up with the idea, the innovator.
Okay.
And so we like that. I will also just say, and I think you already know, we're particularly focused on health equity, and we are pursuing assets or opportunities where we feel the particular indication, the condition that we're treating, is one uh, where we're disproportionate, we're African Americans, in particular, people of color and disadvantaged populations more broadly, are disproportionately negatively impacted by that indication. Similar, diabetes, kidney disease, with cardiovascular disease. Right now, we're going after the indication for sepsis and septic shock.
Okay.
In the U.S., about 1.7 African Americans are 1.7 times more likely to die from that condition than our white counterparts in the U.S. And on a global basis, the number is more like 5 or 6 times more likely to die. So that's an indication that we would just love to fix, and we think we actually got a solution for it.
Okay, great. Because here's what I do know, and I know people in the community know, but if you come up with a solution, there is a huge payday because no one really, my bias, and I'll put it out there. I just don't think, not every pharmaceutical company can go after everything. They have to go after the big home runs because admittedly, they spend a whole lot of money and there's a lot of starts. That's why it's the R and the D part. Research, it's a lot of things fail. But if you come up with something that's really big for a small population that works, oh man, that's a big payday for you and everyone else involved in that. Is that what led you to focus on that, or did you just see things in the market? Because I want to believe that Paul Burton it looks at the world a little differently than everybody else.
Mm.
And so what?
I don't want to bust your idealism or anything like that right around me, but I do want you to recognize, and I hope everyone else who's listening and watching recognize that in many ways I'm just like anybody else, frankly speaking. But on the septic shock opportunity, um, my dad died from septic shock.
Oh,
And so, and
sorry to
that
hear that.
happened, yes, but he was 51. He was 5 years younger than I am now. And so, he had a lot of life to live when he died from septic shock. A lot of people die from septic shock under those circumstances. So, septic shock is actually not a rare indication. More people die from sepsis and septic shock globally than cancer. In fact, about 11 million people died from septic shock last year versus 9.6 million people died from cancer, and 3.4 million of those people were children on a global
Wow.
basis. A lot of them sub-Saharan Africa, but 3.4 million children die from septic shock annually. That's 9,000 a day, right? And so it's a meaningful condition that we need a solution to. In the U.S., about 360,000 people died from it annually. But on a global basis, that number is 11 million. And it's the second leading cause, septic shock. It's the second leading cause of maternal fatalities, right?
Is it
And we
really?
know, yes, it is. And so we know we're in a crisis state with maternal fatalities, in particular amongst the African American community. And this can be a solution to addressing a part of that, right? There's a need to hit these problems from a number of different angles, and this is one of the angles where maternal fatalities can be hit and get some positive results. And so our solution comes from a company called Vivicell Bio, and an African American inventor, innovator by the name of Cuthbert Simpkins III.
Okay.
He's a down brother. He's a he's a Harvard Medical School grad. He was formerly the head of LSU's ER or trauma unit in Shreveport, Louisiana. I think he's a named professor now at Kansas University, and He's a third generation physician.
Okay.
So and he's come up with a solution, and he's taken that solution already and put it in the clinic, right? So he's completed a phase 2 clinical trial, and he got 100% efficacy on its primary and secondary endpoints.
100%.
Yeah, exactly. Just blew the doors off.
Wow.
He's improved survivability for that indication in the study that he did to 70% for patients who had who had less than a 10% expectation of surviving. So the FDA has cleared them to start a phase 3 study, which we hope they'll start later on this quarter, maybe March. And we think we could be finding an exit with that company, a big exit with that company, unicorn type exit, sometime in the not too distant future. So we're super excited for him and for his team. We've been with them for a long time, and it hasn't been an easy road. They're not done, they still got challenges that they're facing, but they are looking really good right now.
Congratulations on that. It's never easy, because science is, it's tough. It's tough on so many different levels. I want to come back to that. But before we go further into that, how did Two Flow Ventures start? I mean, you're the founder of it.
Yep.
Your mission is a good one. I like it. How did you come up with, tell me a little bit about the start of the genesis of it all.
So for many years, really a couple of decades now, right? I've been attending healthcare conferences, and I would go to these conferences. And for instance, I just returned from JP Morgan's 42nd annual healthcare conference in San Francisco, Union Square, San Francisco. And they get about 50,000 investment bankers and venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies that track down there every year around the second week of January, and for about a week. And a sea of these suits, right? And these Gucci shoes and these fancy scarves and whatnot, and showing up in the meetings with these fancy laptops and fancy phones, and making deals. They're going to shape healthcare into the future, right? Big deals. And so I would go to that event every year, and I'd be in a meeting or be in a speaking setting, and I'd find that I'd be the only African American out of 500 or 1,000 people. You know what I mean? And you can see seas of folks, and you see very few. Back in the day, and when I did see one, we would acknowledge one another, right? We give it, but in the early days, up until recently, it was just very few. And so I thought to myself, if we've got these huge disparities that you talked about in terms of the healthcare outcomes, in terms of financing, and less than African Americans or people of color broadly just represent an inadequate proportion of those involved in innovative healthcare. And so I was like, we need to kind of create a hub that can attract African Americans and Latinas and Latinos and others to participate in this. We got to create a hub that's going to be attractive to them. And so and we've got to invest in them and support them in a way that's different from the way the typical venture capital firm does it. Their way of doing things oftentimes can be viewed as almost adversarial to our founders. And so what we have done here is we've got this studio which supports them in a big way, which encourages them in a way that's different, which gets involved in helping them on a day in, day out basis rather than just checking in on a quarterly basis.
Because
Go ahead.
That's unique to have the studio. Is that something that you set up in the beginning, or did you see that was something that was needed as your investment portfolio was growing?
That's something that was needed as my investment portfolio was growing. It didn't. It's a evolution. Like you have already indicated, it's a necessity is the mother of innovation, really, right? And it was needed, and it's the thing that works. Our folks need, and we need a different kind of environment to really excel and to thrive in. And so the startup studio model, and then you couple that with the fact that we have a lot of folks who are actually in the industry
Yeah.
and that are available. They've got full-time jobs at Bristol Myers Squibb, at Pfizer, at Johnson and Johnson, and they're willing to give a few hours here and there, and having those folks available to provide coaching and mentorship and guidance to these young entrepreneurs is different, and it helps them to avoid the pitfalls that the typical startup company oftentimes runs into.
I like what I'm hearing because I was the inaugural executive director of the Chicago Innovation Mentors, and nobody does this alone. Success doesn't come as a single entity. I don't know any sport. Golf has I don't know, but I just know in business, it's just not a solo act, and there are so many facets to running a business from a startup. um, and I liked how you've wrapped certain things around, and I see that analogous to that. When I think about what you just said, I think about matter. And is the Chicago infrastructure? I mean, Two Flow Ventures, your portfolio is not just in the Midwest; it's probably all over the globe. So, with that said, um, you're located here in the Chicagoland area. Is the infrastructure supportive of your mission?
It is, so I'm a member of Matter, have been since Matter was formed with Steve Collins, and I've gone through your program over there, the Chicago Innovation Mentor Program with Steve Gould, and so kudos to you for creating that, because that is big in many ways. I probably borrowed some of your processes in what we currently do today, because it made a difference, right? And yeah, we bought it's best form of flattery and a little imitation. And so in terms of infrastructure today, you look at Fulton Labs in the Fulton Markets area where Portal Innovation is located. They've got wet labs, and we've got a couple of our companies that are now operating out of that space. Schedule One Therapeutics, a company that I recently joined their board of directors, a publicly traded company called Cardio Diagnostics, actually started out of the Portal Innovation space. And so that's a space that provides great infrastructure to companies here in the Chicagoland area. Um, so I think we have the beginnings. Northwestern now has a new healthcare incubator that is up and running, and we want to be available to help them. I think the University of Illinois and the Illinois Ventures is a place that we'd like to help. I think they need some help. The fact of the matter is they haven't really been supportive of underrepresented populations, and we'd like to help them become more supportive of that. But and they have some infrastructure, but they need some help in terms of accessing and selecting investments in underrepresented populations. So there's some places where additional support and help is needed, but the foundation, the bones for what we need, they're present.
Okay. And so, as you've gone on your roadshow, since we're still talking a little bit about how you've gotten started, and I really, Paul, want to just thank you and give you kudos for doing this. You will be successful. You're going to hit some home runs. So, as you've gone out and raised your portfolio, um, has that been, have you, I'm not going to say it's been easy, but what kind of journey have you been
That's a
on?
good question. That's a good question, Keith. It's a good question, and I'm happy to share. Right, so we have some good investors right now, aside from myself, right? And I'm sure you know how that goes,
Yes.
right? We have some good investors aside from myself, and we're blessed that way. We're very grateful for those folks. And we are out looking to raise a $30 million fund, which is some people say a modest fund, some people say that's a great fund, whatever you want to call it, but that's what we're out targeting right now, 30 million bucks. We have assets under management that approximate 30 million right now. It might be just a shad below that, but we're looking to have a fund that would, do quite a bit. Assuming Vivicell Bio gets acquired relatively soon, we will probably quadruple our assets under management. We're hopeful around by the end of this year. But in terms of the challenge of raising dollars, 2022 and this past year, 2023, for folks who are not in the innovation fundraising space, I'll tell you that it has been a challenging year for everybody. And most people are coming to me asking for money, right? And so, and we've made a couple of investments, but we've also been, out here hustling, trying to raise dollars for this fund, and it's been a challenging environment. We feel like we've got some close to commitments, not real commitments, but some close to commitments, and we're going to be able to close this round of financing in this first half of this year. Hopefully, the first quarter of this year. But we'll see. Um, um, it has been challenging. Again, more challenging in these last 2 years than it has been probably in the past decade.
Wow.
And
Is there a
yeah,
reason
that's a
why you
fact.
think?
Yeah, well, yes, the same reasons why everybody else, when the economy hurts, is specifically though, what we have had happen is the interest rates went up,
Yes.
and when interest rates go up, the comparison between investing in risky equity assets in debt versus debt assets, that comparison doesn't look as good for what my assets do. The second piece is that those interest rates going up caused inflation to go up, and it caused companies that normally support us to pause. Frankly speaking, many of them just put on the brakes and decided that they were just going to be still and see what happens. Folks were just not interested in taking on risk. Uh, Early on, 2022, the stock market didn't do really well. Now, 2023, the stock market bounced back extraordinarily well, and there's strong indications that that we're going to have a soft landing in terms of addressing the inflation issue, and the interest rates are heading back, south, and the economy hasn't been too disturbed.
Paul, and I'm listening to you, and the risk profile of what you're investing in is really no different than any other healthcare concept. I mean, I have this pen and it can cure HIV, but as long as it's in the concept phase, it can do anything I say it can do until I put it into development and research. And so,
Yep.
um, is it I mean, there's so many ways I can go with this question. And so when I think about the risk profile, a lot of people during the pandemic and post pandemic have made a lot of money. And, um, and I just think about things. I mean, money, is it the money component, or is it that folks don't see the underserved healthcare issue as a moneymaker?
That's a good one. That's a good question. So we conducted a health equity investment symposium. I believe it was in September of 2023. So it's been about 4 or 5 months ago,
Okay.
and certainly what you stated around people not viewing health equity as something that's profitable or something that's worthy from an economic standpoint, in terms of giving attention to or throwing your dollars towards. Certainly that issue comes up. But we had as our keynote speaker a gentleman by the name of Ted Love.
Okay.
And he had formerly, you probably know of Ted. He'd by the time we brought him in the year earlier, or less than a year earlier, he'd sold his company as the CEO. He sold his company, Global Blood Therapeutics, commonly referred to as GBT, Global Blood Therapeutics. They sold it to Pfizer. And he sold it to Pfizer for, I think, $5.7, $5.8 billion. Some places you can research, it'll say 5.3, 5.4.
It's
But I
in the
talked to the
beef,
investment
right?
banker that covered it. Yeah, it was 5.7, 5.8. What is a big number, right? And that company uh, claim to fame is that it came up with a treatment for sickle cell disease, and which has already uh, worked to double the lifespan of those who are suffering from sickle cell already. And Ted shared during his speech how, one, he was very passionate about moving that forward. Sickle cell disease is a condition that predominantly impact people of color, African Americans,
Yes, it
right?
does.
And it's a rare indication. And so you think a rare indication that primarily impacts people of color is not going to get any dollars, right? But he raised $1.5 billion in totality, right, to bring that thing forward and to ultimately sell it for the $5 billion. So he got it done. Ted Love is an African American physician, really a businessman, but physician by training, and he got it done. And he would oftentimes hear people, not oftentimes, but occasionally hear people say, you are a social justice company. That's Global Blood Therapeutics. You're a social justice company masquerading as a pharmaceutical company, right? And ultimately getting it done, right? Because he did. He took it through discovery, through clinical trials, clinical development, commercialization, in there, treating patients, all the fundraising, everything necessary. And he'll tell you it wasn't easy and it's hard and it's a health equity play, right? It's entirely a health equity play. So you can do it. Now, the exception does not prove the rule, right? I mean, I guess for me, it can. It does. The rule is that things tend to be harder for us.
Yeah.
Folks tend not to want to finance what we do. It's going to be more challenging, but uh, occasionally we can get it done, and we've got enough space, and more space than our ancestors have, and we have no choice but to put forth the effort to get it done.
Well, I always say you are who you hang with, and when I go and I look at your team and what you've put together, you're hanging with some pretty smart folks on the business side, and you sprinkle that with this studio that you're talking about, and you sprinkle that with a little bit of money. Um, Boy, if you have a success like this, $5.8 billion, that's enough to get people's attention, right? And because you don't need everybody, you just need a couple of winners there. So with that said, you now go out and you seek smart folks who have ideas. And before we go there, I just know, having been to the JP Morgan conference myself, because I started a pharma company that went public. And so, Ocularis was it. So, I mean, I took what we did at Pathogenesis, and then I said, "Oh man, well, I got to start an idea." Found a mad scientist who had something that was in the ophthalmic realm, and we took the concept that was for folks who had night vision problems, and it went public. And so, I know that
That's a big
yeah,
deal.
yeah, it really is. And so, I just wish the stock was performing a little bit better than
I
it
heard
is,
that.
you know. Yeah. And so I just know that as trying to find those wins and trying to find those investors, going to JP Morgan, are there more folks who are minority folks, not investors, but the scientists? Is the uh, population of folks who are running around a lot more now for you?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I've been going there forever to JP Morgan, right? And this year the pricing at JP Morgan for everything is through the roof, brother, right? And pricing dictates a lot with me. And what I mean by the pricing through the roof, the hotel rooms for the simple hotel rooms were $1,500 a night. It was crazy. And the nice places, the really nice places, they were $2,000, $3,000 a night during the conference. And I've got four companies that I wanted to take down there, and I was like, well, we can't afford that. And so instead, what we did, we rented a house, and I'm using
Smart.
like, well, yeah, it
That's
was, and I
innovative. That's innovative.
was. We do with necessity. We rented a nice house in a suburb and big house for a price that was way better, right? Less than $1,000 a night, and we put 5 bedrooms, right? And we probably had 6 people, 7 people down there in that house. So we got a tremendous value, right? We got a tremendous value, and then we hosted a party, and we had over 70 folks at our party. We probably got 80 people who more than that said they wanted to come. And there were a number of events at the conference this year that were people of color oriented, and different organizations. We did our event. We did it in collaboration with the Women of Color in Pharma, WOSEP, and their president and one of their co-founders, Charlotte Jones Burton. So what I'm saying is, and so that was a space for this population that oftentimes feels maligned there, and where folks could interact and network and connect with one another, identify potential financing sources, identify potential clinical development resources or commercialization resources, all kinds of things. And they did a lot of networking, a lot of connecting, and 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 even walking down the streets now in Union Square, San Francisco, during the conference, you're going to bump into way more African Americans than in years past. Things are changing. They haven't changed, you know, that much. So instead of maybe a 1% or less than 1% number, I would say today you probably saw 3-4% of the population there. So it's different. It's not not the majority by any stretch of the imagination,
Well,
but
I
we're
think
there.
I think a lot of people, I just know I just have my mother in my head that when I was gonna quit my job and go there, I just had a baby, bought a house, and she thought I had lost my natural mind, gonna quit a what she called a good job to go after something that doesn't have any products. And and I said, Mom, trust me. I remember quitting my first pharmaceutical job, Upjohn, to go back to business school. She thought I lost my natural mind then. And I tripled my salary within 2 years. And she was like, I had to show her, right? So is it, I think you have and I'm just going to pontificate for a moment. I think you have a lot of younger folks who are willing to bet on themselves and see business as an opportunity for wealth creation. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I love it. I love what you're creating. And so I just know in the healthcare space, intent is one thing, performance is another. And when you're talking about science, it's an entirely different ball game, because you got to make sure that you power the study appropriately. You got to bet on whether or not you got the right indication, the right dosage, everything that goes into it. And so, are you seeing more scientists or more business people at the JP Morgan conference?
I think you're seeing both in terms of minorities. You're seeing, and so I'm running across quite a few people, uh, entrepreneurs, scientist types, um, who have fresh ideas, fresh products, fresh innovations, looking for dollars, looking for partners. You see quite a few of them. And you are seeing more people like myself. Not nearly enough people like myself. Not nearly enough people like myself, frankly speaking. So, I think I'm one of three um, black led biotech focused VC shops in the country or in the world, really. And one of three, I think I am. And that are making investments in biotech companies. And so we need a lot more. Our space requires a lot of capital, and I
Yes, it does.
enough capital to get things started, right? But uh, we need more capital, and we need more support.
The only I did a little research because I love doing research on who are the players like you, and I don't know if they're like you or not, but I came up in my research I saw Jumpstart Nova. Don't know if they're a player because there are a lot of um, folks who might be steering money towards um, racial minority groups, but not all in healthcare. It's in other aspects of the investment portfolio. And so, I just, again, kudos to what you are doing out there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few more who do healthcare, right? There's a few companies that are African American led that do healthcare, few more. But on the biotech side, there's almost, like I said, there's just very, very, very little, and the dollars we have are very small, and oftentimes folks will say they want to support what we're doing, and they'll give the money to J.P. Morgan Chase, or they'll give the money to Goldman Sachs, or they'll give the money to Ariel Capital, who doesn't do any venture capital investments, right? Not not hating on them, but they're just not doing the types of investment that folks say they want to allocate their dollars towards. It would be great if folks could figure out a way to get to us and could have figure out a way to support what we're doing so we could do more of it.
Well, if you're in that space, I just believe that just keep plugging away in notoriety and performance, folks will get there. A good friend of mine, or my grad school buddy Marty Nesbitt's done some pretty nice things over at his firm.
He has.
You know, but he's also, he's got some pretty powerful friends too.
He certainly does.
And the former president. So
this year is an outstanding shop.
yes, it really is.
It's an outstanding shop. They got Robert Parkinson over there is a great partner, and he's got some. Marty's got some great partners and a great organization, great structure. Phil Alfonso over there. There's some great people over there that I interact with.
Good. Well, I'm glad. And so as you were building the company, was it easy to build your core team?
No, no, it's not easy. It's not easy to do it. It's essential that you do, but it's not been easy. Nothing about what we've done here has been really easy. Um, Patience is key, and not being in a rush, um, and spending some time with folks and getting to know people and figuring out ways to get to know people incrementally, but ultimately get to know them for real. And that doesn't happen in an interview necessarily, right?
So how do you do that? Because I would love to, steal some of your magic. How do you get to know people for real? I mean, I would love that. I think I'm a good reader of people. No, seriously, because I don't think you're talking about whether you like the person well enough to have a beer. I think you're talking about something different, and so can you talk a little bit about, how you look at people? Because that's a talent.
I'm good with that. I'm not perfect, but I am good at it. And the way one is, you want to be the kind of person yourself that people want to partner with, and that's the first thing is working on yourself and being all of that as being as much as of what you can be, and it's the full package, right? It's about, you know, being strong and healthy and smart and hardworking and loyal and dependable and committed and all those sort of things that you're looking for. You want to be, you need to be, in order to get the partner you're looking for. And then in terms of how you get to know them for real, you work on projects with them. You bring them on as an advisor, or you take on some assignments with them and whatever they might be working on, and you do it over a period of months, right? And you put them in a working group. You say we were doing a healthcare investment symposium, and we had 10, 12 people in a working group. You had them as one of those people. See if they show up on the call every week. And when they show up to the call, what kind of contributions do they make? And then do they follow through with those contributions? I'm not talking about dollar amounts, but I'm talking about their suggestions, and oh, I can get this location, or I can get this sponsor, or I can get these products, or I can do this, or I can do that. I can get this speaker, or I can get these people to speak. All those types of things. You give them an opportunity to show them their real selves, and how committed they are, and how reliable they are, and how dependable they are. And you do that over a few months, right? And you're going to see the real person. You don't see the real person in an hour-long interview once. You see the real person over months, and real interactions with that person. And when they can't just be their absolute best self, on a date.
Well said.
That's how I do it, and I do that also in conjunction with other people. So you're in we have on this project or that project or whatever project with one of these portfolio companies. The company needs to raise money, or the company needs a certain contract, and we've got a working group of 7 or 8 people to support the company in this activity. And so it's me and 3 or 4 people that are trusted, that have been working with me for a few years, and we bring in a new person, and we can all sit back and help evaluate if that person has been a real asset, if they really contributed. And people are, oh wow, that's a great addition to the team, Paul. Oh wow, this person is super. Oh wow, you see what they're talking about doing here? And a few more months, you hear a few more things from a few more people, and you with that process and that approach, you get to know people,
Yeah, I
and
would
you get to
agree
know
with
the real person.
that. I kudos for you on that. I appreciate the input. If folks are listening, you know, you put somebody in a working group, put them on a real problem, and see how they show up when they don't have to, and it's not a job. You know, you'll get to see, I hear you. You'll get to see what they're doing. So I'm going to switch the little gears here a little bit now, and we've talked a little bit about how you've gotten started, your business model. On the business model part, do you consider it a non-traditional business model?
For sure, it's
Okay.
absolutely non-traditional.
Um, and because I really don't know how some of the other venture capital firms are structured, do they not? I thought they tried to, help their portfolio companies a little bit, but not like you, is
Right?
what
They
I'm hearing.
verbalize that. They absolutely verbalize it. That they're going to help you, right? They mean to, right? They'll write you a check occasionally, until they decide that you're not going to be successful, and then your persona non gratis. But so yes, we're very different from that vantage point. We have to be different though, right? So part of what we're trying to do here is not just have a successful economic outcome. We're also trying to provide a platform, a hub where people could come in and work with us and get trained and learn more about our space, and then feel good about it, right? And find and to create an environment that's attractive, that's going to attract other people to participate in it, right? And it needs to feel good. It needs to be supportive. It needs to be educational. It needs to be informative. It needs to be effective at at, at persuading highly talented, highly sought after, highly valuable people in participating. And so, again, the typical VC shop is going to check in on a company on a quarterly basis. They're going to ask the CFO or the CEO or somebody at that company to provide them with financial updates from how the company is performing or how much money the company is spending and what kind of progress they're making with developing an asset on a quarterly basis.
Right.
And they're going to check in and they're going to look, and the management team is going to see, okay, do they need some help? They need some money, whatever the case is. Two-flow, conversely, we've got somebody who's with that CEO going to investor meetings, and then once a week, 6 or 7 people, along with their CEO and our team members, get together and talk about what are we going to do next to help that company and support that company, and how we're going to support that company once a week.
Wow.
And as big projects come along, we'll have 3 or 4 of our advisors there with the company, right, helping that company do what that company wants to do and what that company needs to do to be successful. The company has an issue with the FDA or anybody, they're going to let us know about it, not when the quarterly meeting comes up, but shortly after they get notice that they got an issue or a challenge, where we can bring all our resources to bear on that issue immediately, and not come back and say, oh, well, we should have did this and we should have did that and we could have did this and we could have did that. Instead, we know about what's going on. We're going to do a deep dive brainstorming session on it, and we're going to come and bring phenomenal resources to bear to help them come up with the ideal solution.
People, if they're listening, that is huge, because I have seen products that were headed to the pasture still turn a profit. And I just wanted to ask you this question. Do you believe, when you look at some of the portfolio of venture capital firms and even some of the healthcare companies, there's a adage that says we don't bet on the product per se, we bet on the team. And so, based on your model, it sounds to me, I mean, of course you're betting on the product concept as well, but if you have the wrong team, they're not going to go too far.
Agreed.
And so, based on your model, I bet your win ratio is going to be a little higher. This is me pontificating based on that you're going to have some. I mean, you may not have major home runs where you're selling it for $5 billion, but I believe there's a liquidity event somewhere down the line. Because, if you write a check to one of your investors, there's, the people that invested in you and even your own money, you want a return on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So with the failure rate is going to be a lot less in our approach, and so there's research looking at our approach.
There is.
Yes, there's research. I'll send it to you. But GAN research took a look at a couple of hundred, I think, or maybe 150. I might be. I don't. But a significant number of investment firms like us that utilize a startup studio business model, and they gleaned from that rather than only 1 out of 10 of those companies being successful, which is typical for a VC business, right? The typical seed fund for a venture capital firm is they expect 1 out of 10 to be successful. Conversely, those are using the startup studio business model, they get a number that's converse to that. They get 9 out of 10 being successful, which feels almost unbelievable. But I'll tell you, to date, with our own experience, we just haven't had very many failures, and I attribute it to the business model.
Wow, kudos to you. Kudos to you. So let's talk a little bit about wins, portfolio wins, and not so much what's in your portfolio, but when you look around, what do you think is the secret sauce to a win in your industry?
That's a good question. So, there oftentimes in our industry, what happens, you look at what Ted Love did with Global Blood Therapeutics in his treatment for sickle cell disease. There was this, the science had to be, the science has to be right ultimately, right?
Absolutely.
But you can have really good science and still fail. And it's a shame, right? When you think about how hard it is to do what we do, and then for you to get the science right and still fail. But it happens all the time, unfortunately. Because, well, how do you fail when you have the right science? Well, because you design a poor clinical trial, right? Where the clinical trial didn't test what you wanted it to test in patients in a way where it could be successful, and as a result, because it lacks statistical differentiation from a placebo, it doesn't get approved, and or it doesn't get the label that you need it to have, and ultimately it doesn't have commercial success because it never really has a chance. So, and in our space, largely, what's going on here is um, you've got to figure out a way to be working on a project that ultimately has good science, a good team, that has excellent relationships. It's not the relationships with the FDA or others necessarily that drive your success, but it doesn't hurt if you can communicate effectively with the FDA. If the FDA admires the work that you're doing because it's important, because it's also important that you're going after a problem that's really impactful, I think, and at least that's what we're trying to do. We want to go after things that matter, and so I think all of that matters. And you can getting people to believe in what you're doing in a way where it's about more than just the money is really not just helpful. I mean, it's not essential, but it's a big difference maker. If you can get people to believe in what you're doing, is really important. That's what we're trying to do here at Two Flow. I think we've done that at Two Flow. I think the people who are
I think you're doing it, Paul. I think seriously, I think you're doing it. I mean, your company's been around how long? Since the 2013?
Yeah, that's about right.
So, if you weren't doing it, I don't know if you would still be doing it in 2024. So you must be doing something right. And, to consider your business model, your portfolio. I love what I'm hearing. I just know that having been a part of, all my life, I've worked at some fairly large companies, and I've always worked on innovative products, and some of them have well, by the time Abbott Labs or some of the others put a marketer or a finance guy on a team, it was pretty certain to come to market, right? But you don't know how it's going to perform in the marketplace. Then when I switched over to some of the other companies, you knew it was going to come. Well, we didn't know. I remember everybody sitting in the conference room because we were giving our pitch to the FDA, and it was a drum roll, whether we were going to get approved or we weren't. And those are some moments where, as an entrepreneur, your whole life is right there, right? It could be
on the balance.
Yep, it's right there. And so I get it, and that's why I asked you about the secret success. And I just know that I've been a part of some teams where we liked each other, the science was good, we had the right money. And then I've been a part of a team where the team liked each other, we had the money, but the science results came back vague. That's the kiss of death, because if you got money, why are you going to throw it at the research project again? You have to hit a home run. So to your point, the science has to work. And the sad part, I agree with you, is that if the science is working and you still fail, it's got to be the team. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that part?
Oh yes, there's no question about it, and that happens unfortunately a lot.
Does it? Wow. Because, here's my thought. I always thought that, the venture capital world always bet on the team, right? They always bet on the team, and they pick the right team. And what you're telling me is they don't.
No, they don't always pick the right team, and it's more complicated. So the team that you needed at the very beginning could be very different from the team you need when you're at a point where you're in the phase 3 with the FDA, or with the team you're going to need when you're commercializing and you're launching product on a global basis. Their team, the needs of the team, and the membership of the teams will vary. And one of the things that we think we are really good at, and which is really important for us, is recognizing when you need to upgrade or when you need to transition. Not necessarily upgrade, but transition to a different type of person to take the company to another level and to manage it in another way. Um, and it varies. It just does. It takes and ideally, there's a big part of this is self awareness, and a willingness to observe and be evaluated and be coached on the part of the team. We insist on it though, right? And it's an understanding that that's what's happening when you get a two flow investment, is that we're gonna, we're part of you, and we want you to ultimately be successful. We want you to have a legacy, and you get you nice approved FDA approved product, you're gonna have a legacy.
Yeah.
And we want that for you.
So I just have a couple more questions for you, Paul. Do you have the time?
I'll make the time for you, Keith.
Okay, so as you let's just talk about portfolios for a second, because I love the concept that you talked about, health equity. Do you have a list of things that you are constantly looking for, or is your investment search centered around who comes through the door? For example, sepsis. Did you happen to find that, or is that something that you were looking for?
It
And it doesn't have to be sepsis, but I want you to expand it to your whole portfolio.
Right, I understand. It evolves. Back then, it was what comes through the door, and
Gotcha.
today is more driven by what we want, and what are some of our own expertise, and what we think is important. And so we're much more in the driver's seat around what we get involved in today, and we're still opportunistic, but absolutely, right now, for instance, we're into kidney disease, and we're into addressing diabetes, type 1 and type 2. That condition has a huge impact on our population, and we would love to come up with some solutions for that circumstance. We've got this is a combination of opportunistic and and what we care about. But we took a company, Temperance Therapeutics, we invested in, and that company has a treatment for vitiligo. Vitiligo is a depigmentation disease. We invested in that company in 2018, and at that time, this is pre George Floyd. There was really no interest in supporting conditions that primarily impacted people of color, especially if they weren't life threatening. And vitiligo is not necessarily life threatening, but for people who suffer that depigmentation disease, it is extremely traumatic, right?
Yeah.
It causes a lot of trauma for them. And I spent time with the patient advocacy groups there. So we made an investment there because we just felt like that was not just the right thing to do, but also because the technology that this particular scientist that came up with was phenomenal. And they were a genius in the field, and they knew everything they had to know about this space. So, are there? So I talked about the kidney situation. I talked about the skin depigmentation situations, um, cardiovascular disease. Is for us is something that disproportionately negatively impacts us. So we're always interested in that. Obviously, many cancers are going to be places where we are going to have a strong interest. Cancer is something it impacts the broader population, but unfortunately, it impacts us worse.
Yeah. I saw a news report today that it's starting to target or show up in folks in a lot more on folks under 50, more so than ever. But you're right. So I applaud you for your, you guys are searching for that. And I hope folks that are listening, those scientists that are listening or business folks that are listening, find Two Flow Ventures, Paul Burton. Anything you want to add to the portfolio discussion? Because, when I think of this, and I really apologize to the folks that are listening, I have a little bit of a cold and a cough, and it's starting to show up right now, and I sound a little strange, stranger than I normally do. But Paul,
Keith, you were too much, Keith.
but Paul,
Go ahead.
Based on how you look at portfolios, I want to pick your brain a little bit about how venture capitalists think about their portfolio, and maybe a private equity firm might think about their portfolio. Is it the same or a little different?
That's going to be different. Yeah, it's different. I mean, the private equity guy is got cash flow. Tends to have a fair amount of cash flow driving, at least on the biotech side. Healthcare, when you get a mix of digital, you can get some cash flow on the digital side, but the cash flow is usually immaterial. Not even cash flow. Usually, it's just going to be some revenue. But on the VC side, you're just not you're not going to get a lot of that. You're not going to get a lot of revenue. Our assets tend to be monetized before there's any real significant cash flow, and it's big numbers, right? And you get big returns, but that's the difference. And the private equity business also will be looking at other means by which to finance their companies aside from just pure equity rounds, right? Once they get that initial financing in place, that fresh equity in place, then they're going to be looking for how to address the other components of the cap structure, in particular the fixed piece, the debt, right? And sounds like you want to be an LBO guy, but there's folks out there who do that, and it's a different bit of analysis. The types of returns are different too, right? Because on the VC side, you're going to put in a lot more cash, and the return is going to be not as large because you put in so much cash. But the certainty around it is going to be a lot greater. Whereas on the VC, on our side, it's a lot more risky. Now, what we've tried to do at Two Flow Ventures is mitigate the risk, de-risk every step of the way, and help our investors get more comfortable with the fact that we're going to get you a return.
Gotcha.
We're going to get you a return on your capital. Versus a lot of VCs. You look at the VC deals, you think to yourself, man, you can lose all of your money on a VC deal. And you can.
Yeah.
But we try our best to put ourselves in situations where we can take that other piece off the table. Sometimes we can't, but we try to put ourselves in a situation where we can take that other piece off the table. We figure out a way to generate some kind of return for our investors.
Well, these next couple of questions, I'm going to have some fun with it. So, smart scientist walks in. He has this new diabetes medication or anything. How do you go about valuing the concept or the business?
Oh, that's a good question. You're showing your colors now, Keith. You are showing your colors, Mr. Finance Man. You think your audience all will understand what we're going to get into now on the finance side?
They have to catch up. As Bruno Mars would say, they have to keep up.
They got to keep up. I heard that. So I love it. So The way we do that is we look at comparable and comparable companies and precedented transactions, um, and oftentimes it'll be based off what's happening in the market today. So that fluctuates from time to time, right? So the valuation that happens for that type of company today is different from the valuation that would have happened with that type of company 4 or 5 years ago,
I see.
right? And so, um, but so if it's if the company uh, is purely better than an idea, right? Because I don't just get into just pure idea. I want the
Right.
company to have
Proof of concept.
yeah, proof. There you go. It's got a proof of concept, and so if it's proof of concept, and I will give somewhere. I will in terms of valuation. I could value that thing anywhere from 1 million, maybe even less than that, $500,000 to $2 to $3 million.
Got you.
500,000 bucks to $2 to $3 million based off of proof of concept data, having filed for a patent that makes sense, and then me understanding what the market opportunity will be like, and it makes sense from a commercial standpoint. Everything making sense. It's something that I want to invest in. It'll be somewhere between $500,000 pre-money valuation to $3 million valuation.
Okay. Okay. I think my listeners will understand that because if they're
Okay, you got some smart listeners. You got some smart listeners.
yeah. So my last question, and I do appreciate the time, is when you look into the future, what are you seeing?
Right.
What's your view of the future? And I don't have. You can go
You don't have a
anywhere
crystal
you
ball?
want to.
How about you got a crystal ball?
No, but you can go anywhere you want to with this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I the future. So 2024, I think it's going to be a good year for my ecosystem. My ecosystem being innovative healthcare. I think a lot of companies, startup companies that weren't getting financing, that deserve to have financing, this year are able to get so, are able to acquire the financing that they need.
Now, why do you think that is? Is it because is it because of personalized medicine? Is it because of something else? What do you think is
I
driving
think
that?
for one, I think a lot of assets that were out there that really didn't deserve any dollars have failed. You know what I mean? I
Wow.
think there's a lot of things out here that have failed, and I don't think those that, and so they're gonna, and so there are a lot of companies that have failed, and they closed their doors left and right. I get the emails from folks who are no longer in business, and so that clears the runway a bit for the more worthy opportunities. If you figured out a way to survive, it's an indication of a level of resilience that oftentimes can, in and of itself, be financeable. Um, and then I think that you know the the economic environment is just flat out improving. People have adjusted to the post-COVID environment. Um, they've adjusted to inflation, and now inflation is going down or has gone down, and interest rates have gone down. And so there's going to be more money accessible. Don't you've heard the term "don't fight the Fed," right?
Yeah.
And so, if 2022 and 2023, you were fighting the Fed if you were bullish,
Uh,
and in 2024, the Fed's going to be moving in a direction easing monetary, and it's going to allow for it'll make all the sense in the world to be bullish.
well,
So
Paul,
that's what I think.
go ahead.
No. That's what from a financial standpoint, a purely financial standpoint, I think that's happening. Also, there's going to be a lot of money thrown at AI, and it ought to be a lot of money thrown at AI. There's going to be money thrown at at machine learning, or I guess that is part of AI.
Mm-hmm.
There is the rate of innovation in the healthcare space. I don't think it's been any faster than it is right now. So I just think there's an abundance of great uh, assets and businesses and entrepreneurs that are in this ecosystem today that know how to uh, communicate effectively, and there's dollars that have, frankly speaking, been on the wayside, waiting to be put in play.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I
Yeah.
think AI is gonna it's gonna change the game a little bit. Um, but I think there's still a lot of stuff that people don't know. Um, I've jumped on the bandwagon of it because I think it can help in different ways. But one of the things I was going to say is in my other business during COVID, I was helping a diagnostic company on the innovative side, and I saw how quickly the FDA was turning stuff out, how how they were really you know hell bent on getting solutions to the marketplace because they didn't know that people were going to die. They thought half the world population is going to die from COVID. So there is a room for expediency in this whole healthcare process. And so that's why I wanted to pick your brain. You're out in JP Morgan dealing with all these folks who are solving everything, and you're talking to some scientists, and there's some folks in the scientific world that are light years ahead of where we folks are here in Chicago, both Northwestern and University of Chicago and iBio and the University of Illinois. These folks are really out there thinking of some really innovative, cutting edge stuff. So, but Paul Burton, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Burton, he's the managing partner of Two Flow Ventures. Look him up, find them if you have an idea, because they're looking for folks. Thanks for listening to The Next Big Thing. I'm your host, Keith D. Terry. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support this podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and a review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on my YouTube channel at Keith D. Terry. If you want to recommend a guest, please email me at info@terryperformancegroup.com. This has been produced by your host and Jade Productions.